Good morning and welcome back to Compound Conversations. I'm Jesse,
And I'm Julie.
and today we are talking about where the work runs. Um, Julie and I were just talking actually right off camera here before we got started, and one of the things we were talking about is something that almost no company has yet is extremely important for the agentic era, and that is disciplined knowledge management.
Yes.
I've said for a while that every modern company is in fact a tech company. You might not think about yourself that way, but every one of us has CRMs and ERPs and marketing automation tools and all of these things, all of the software that powers our business. Yet at the same time, I think you're like most of us, your humans aren't always super great at keeping those systems current. Julie, have you ever been in an organization where you've got all of the software in the world and yet it doesn't get filled out the way it's supposed to?
Well, yeah, you're in that organization where you have all of the systems, but we still don't know what anybody does,
Right.
right? Like that's where you kind of see that, right? It's like, again, we have the job description, but we don't know the actual work that gets done. We have the systems to do work, but we don't actually know what work. It goes back to outcomes,
Mhm.
right? We've talked about outcomes a lot. But yeah, you see that.
So one of the ways I think about this is, or at least I find it helpful, is to think about the different categories of systems that we have, because not all systems are equal, and AI doesn't interact with all systems equally. So when I'm thinking about systems, the three different buckets that I like to put our systems in are systems of record, system of knowledge, and systems of semantics. Now, these sound like fancy words, and maybe they're a little fancy, but they're really important and we all have them. So first, systems of record. These are what we would call authoritative data. Things like your CRM, your ERP, these are what we would call sources of truth where records live that we believe are right or wrong or that drive decisions one way or the other. Systems of knowledge relate to know how. So these are things where maybe you've got processes, documents. Think your Google Drive, your Dropbox, your SharePoint, areas where you've got information generally unstructured. And the final system of semantics, these are probably the most underdeveloped systems because up until now, you've never needed to really think about it.
Right.
And a system of semantics is a system where you are clear about meaning. I'll give you an example. We have a really great client called Lucky Little Learners. They're wonderful, wonderful ladies based out of Minnesota. They have a phenomenal business. Internally, we call them Lucky. We call them LLL. We call them Little Learners, right? All of these things mean the same thing to us. But if we don't have a system of semantics, those are three different things, or
Right.
four, whatever number I said. Those are all different things to AI. So those three systems: systems of record, systems of knowledge, and systems of semantics. When we start thinking about design, I find it really helpful to think about these three buckets because when we start thinking about design, we need to start by identifying what the different systems are that we use because either AI is going to have to access it, humans are going to have to manage and lead it, and ultimately all of our workflows are going to flow through these systems. So let's start with systems of record, authoritative data, things like CRMs, ERPs. Julie, you've done a lot of these implementations. I'm sure HR systems would be in the same
Same
thing.
thing. Right.
What are the biggest challenges you see with people managing or maintaining their systems of record so that way the information is accurate, or does everybody always have it updated?
Right. Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things there. Like one of them, if you think about like an HRS system implementation, I think one of the largest challenges that companies have is saying, I'm going to put this system in, but I'm not going to change my business process, right? Systems are built for BPs, for business processes. And so they're built to be integrated into the organization as designed. And so, but what we do as humans is we say, well, no, we're not really doing it that way, as opposed to saying, I'm going to integrate what the system is giving me. And if the system is giving me this, right, let's put that in AI context. If it's giving me this, I'm going to adapt my business process to be sure that I'm optimizing the tool, ERP, SAP, HRIS, AI, any of those types of things, right? And so we have to look at it that way. We have to say that we have to look at how the tool is best designed to work, whatever the tool is,
Yep.
and then be sure that there's a reason you want to implement that tool
Yes.
because it's good, right? You spent months doing disciplined analysis and fit analysis of whether or not this is the right tool for your organization. And then you finally said, okay, yes, I'm going to pick this tool. And that's the important part, right? We have to do that. And I think that's where a lot of times we don't see that discipline. Going back to that knowledge discipline is, let's look at these various system sources. Let's understand what they're bringing into the organization of value. And let's be sure that we're using it the way that we need to do it, as opposed to, as we talked so many times, a layer on top.
Yeah. And I would say this, that the stakes get higher
Oh, yeah.
when you start to connect these things to AI.
Hmm.
Because if you or somebody on your team pulls up a record and they look at it and they're like, oh, yeah, Angie, she does this at Lucky Little Learners. Like they just know that it's in their head.
Right.
But if that's not documented in the system of record, your AI agent doesn't know it. And one of the number one reasons why AI will hallucinate on your own data is because you didn't do a good job maintaining your data,
Right, right.
right?
Well, I mean, I'll take the analogy. We were talking about this before we came on camera, right? We were talking about job descriptions,
Mhm.
right? So the job description question that never gets asked in a performance review, in a job description, I mean, those couple of HR artifacts is what is the role actually doing, right? Because companies go, I have job descriptions, right? Okay. What is the role actually doing? And we've never had to ask that question in such detail as we do have to do now, because we can't direct an agent to assist in the work if we really don't know what the role is actually doing.
Well, there's a parallel track here because there's what the role, the outcome of the role and what the role is doing, but also the information that tracks along that
Right,
role,
right.
right? So, there's always this running joke that CRMs are for sales managers, not for salespeople, even though theoretically they're
Uh,
supposed to be for salespeople.
right,
But
right, right,
across the board, most sales managers I know always complain that their
right,
sales reps aren't updating the CRM. And so they get real frustrated, like, okay, we spent all this money on HubSpot or on Salesforce or whatever it is, so we can get visibility into the sales pipeline.
right,
Yet the salespeople don't upload or update
right,
the information,
right, right,
right? So the role in this particular case might be clear, might be related to prospecting, account management, whatever that particular role is. But if you're not tracking the information at the same
right,
time, then you're going to find your AI agents and your implementations stalling.
right.
And I think this is one of the biggest things
Mhm.
that organizations are going to have to think about when they start moving down this path of agentification. We all have systems of record.
Right.
But one of the questions is, how accurate is it? How well
Mhm.
maintained is it? Where in your people's process are they supposed to be maintaining the system of record?
Mhm.
Now, I'll throw myself under the bus because I am the worst at maintaining our CRMs. In fact, part of what even got me started with some of this stuff was I would have a call with a client and it would go great. And then I would forget to tell Marina all about it. And so, or I get on to the next thing and I would just forget.
Right,
And so then
right,
later
right.
on, she's trying to like guess, what did I do? Right. And so ultimately, one of the first implementations or integrations that I did was I integrated audio transcription into our CRM. And so I could record a call, upload it, it would transcribe it, it would assign all the to dos, and then give Marina a summary of everything that I might have
Right.
otherwise missed because Jesse was very bad at system of record. But Marina, who was running all the operations, needed
That
system of
information,
record,
right?
right?
Right.
So if you're bad at system of record, just know that yes, that's something AI needs, but also AI can help you manage. In fact, just before this call, we were talking about scheduling a meeting with somebody. And as we're having that conversation, since I've got our system of record connected to Claude, I could just be like, hey, Claude, schedule this over here with
Right.
these people, send the invites, yada, yada, yada. And Claude is updating the system of record. But that is one of the first things that you need to be thinking about is what are your
Mhm.
systems of record? How do you maintain it? How do you manage it? Where in your job process is that record both being fed and also being used? Systems of knowledge are a little bit squirrelier, and the reason is because systems of record, generally speaking, are going to be pretty structured. An account has a name and an address and a phone number, right? Systems of knowledge, generally speaking, tend to be more like documents. And one of my biggest frustrations, one of my biggest pet peeves, I should say, maybe it's not quite to the level of frustration. pet peeves is trying to find things.
Right.
Drives me freaking crazy.
Right.
In fact, one of the other reasons why I started down the AI path is because, I don't think people believe me when I say I'm inherently lazy, but I'm inherently lazy, right? And I do not like doing tedious tasks like searching for documents. Many people will tolerate it. I procrastinate. I'll say, forget it. I don't want to do
Right.
this. I'm going to build a system so I never have to do this again because I
Right.
don't want to do it. I'm so
Right.
allergic.
Right.
And so one of the first systems that I built was one that would allow us to do knowledge capture and in a way that's unstructured. So what is a system of knowledge? These are going to be things that generally speaking, you've got in a Word doc or in a Google doc or in a SharePoint, free form, unstructured text. Now, what's great about AI is AI can access this information. AI can use this information and AI can use it, access this information faster than any human. But because it's unstructured, and because if it's not well classified or well maintained, it's also going to be the principal reason why AI hallucinates. Because all of the things that would be throwaway to us, AI doesn't necessarily know it shouldn't be equally weighted, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things that Google actually has seen this being a problem, they released just this week something called the open knowledge format.
Okay.
And this is a way to start structuring unstructured information, which sounds counterintuitive, in such a way that you can feed it to an AI agent, and the AI agent will be able to both weight and interpret where things live in your systems of knowledge as well as your systems of record. Because as you go down this path, right, you get real excited. As soon as you connect your first system of record, you're like, oh my gosh, AI can do this thing. And of course, everybody then wants to do the next thing.
Right.
And they're like, well, we've got all this stuff in Google Drive or in Dropbox. Can I do this? And maybe you
Mhm.
can. In many cases, the answer is yes. But all of those drafts, all of those like throwaway documents, all of those versions, if you don't have a discipline around that,
Mhm.
AI treats the draft as importantly as it treats the polished version. In fact, before we got on this, Julie and I were talking about this with the book we're writing, which will come out hopefully at the end of the month. And this is one of the things that we're wrestling with is that if, we've got all these different drafts in different states, and it becomes very difficult for
Mhm.
Claude, in this case, where we're working with Claude, to be able to know which things to keep and which things to get rid of.
Right.
So systems of knowledge.
But I think if I could just throw in there, I think one of the interesting things when we're thinking about these different knowledge databases, right,
Mhm.
is that the questions, like we're talking about the methodology, right? But it's when you think about your own organization and as that leader, it's questions that leaders are not asking because they've never had to.
Yes.
So the answer was irrelevant when
Yes.
the only place to let me see. The only thing that was available to the leader was the human.
Right.
It's not an irrelevant answer anymore. And so, as we kind of like work through this, I think it's important to think about that is that we've never asked these questions in such a way because the only available method that we had for solving was a human.
Yeah.
And so, like many people listening to this, and even as, we have our compound conversations internally and as well on the screen, right? I mean, it is a new mindset of thinking because we have to think about we have these two workforces,
Yes.
not we just have humans as our solution. And that is, whether we like it or not, that is where we're going. And it's going at a speed that is much faster than anything we've seen
Yes.
historically. And so, a lot of the thoughts around compound conversations is we've got to get that thinking. We've got to start thinking about that differently because we've never had to wrestle with these questions before.
Right.
And because the answers, again, the answer was the human can do it. The answer was Jim can do it. The answer was Sue can do it. The answer was Jesse can do it, right?
Yeah.
That's not the answer anymore. It's not always. It's the answer sometimes, right? But it's not the answer anytime. And so that answer now is irrelevant. And we have to think about the questions differently so that we're getting to the answers, hence the system deployment and the knowledge management in a much different way than we've ever done before, because that's where the real P&L hit impact happens. That's where the headcount paradox happens, right? And so, this is it's a different thinking time.
Well, I love that you call out the two different workforces. They have two very different needs.
Yes.
Right. And in the human only workforce, you could have a bunch of stuff in a Google Drive and tolerate that Julie was going to spend X amount of time just looking up information that
Hmm.
because Jesse didn't store it in the right folder.
Right.
Right. And there is a time cost to that. But on average, I think we feel like it's marginal. I promise you it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Right. Right.
on
Right.
average, it feels marginal because it
Right.
just feels like the necessary friction of work.
Right.
When you start to connect your AI to that, though, you do get time lag in disorganized systems relative to organized systems. But the other thing is you get token costs.
Yes. Yeah. It's a cost.
You incur
It's a
higher token
cost.
costs.
Right.
And right now, one of the things that is true across all models, whether you're using ChatGPT or Claude or some version of the two, whatever it is, all of our token costs right now
Mhm.
are heavily subsidized. You can mark my words, I'm not the one that thinks this, but this is going to be the case. AI is going to get tremendously
Oh,
more expensive
exactly.
in the next
Right.
18 to 24 months.
We're just all getting hooked on it right
We're
now.
all just getting
right.
hooked, right?
Right.
This is the
It's
this
the
is the
cell
first
phone,
one's
right? It's the cell phone. I can't live without it, right? The hook is coming.
you use cell phone. I was going to say it's like the drug dealer, right?
Oh,
That
yeah.
shit's free. So you and I live in different worlds. No, but this is it, right? They're
Right. Right.
trying to hook us onto the systems.
Absolutely. And
And in
it's
fact,
working.
yesterday, this is actually a really great example, just to kind of foreshadow a future that we're all going to have to deal with. Yesterday, Claude went down for about an hour. Now,
Yes.
Claude is
Yeah.
our default for a bunch of my systems.
Yes.
And so when Claude went down, a bunch of our systems just stopped working.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, because we're AI native, we have fail safes. So when
Mhm.
Claude goes down, we could go to open code, we can go to Gemini, we can swap our models like
Right.
this. And I did. So we didn't miss that much of a beat. But it was a foreshadowing of 2 points of vulnerability. Number one, vulnerability is what happens when a model provider goes down. And the second is when models start to become expensive, you can't just throw Opus, to use Claude's number one model, at every single problem. Right. So if your knowledge isn't organized, and I want to bring this back to
Mhm.
the two workforces, right? Because the
Right.
two different workforces have two different needs and two different cost structures.
Absolutely.
And so the cost structure of your AI is going to be token usage. And right
Exactly.
now, we throw away tokens because
Mhm.
it's so heavily subsidized.
Right. Right.
And you can probably get away with that for a little while.
Right. But we don't think of that as a workforce cost.
No, we don't.
Like that's that's the thing that I look at. It's like, well, there's HR and there's IT, and the AI is in the IT bucket. Well, there's a cost to that workforce. And as we again think about that headcount paradox, like we have to be sure we're actually capturing the right cost of, like you said, the workforces, because there are two. And workforce A has one cost, workforce B has another cost. So it is kind of like that labor versus token cost. The other workforce isn't free.
No, it feels
Right.
free because right now, the
Exactly.
way most of us use AI
Right.
is you're logged into Claude or you're logged into ChatGPT. Maybe you're paying the $200 a month,
Right.
and they're heavily subsidizing your token usage because you're doing it as an assistant.
Right.
But when you move it down into your data layer, which is, and you're using these systems of record and systems of knowledge, and as you start to move towards agentification, those costs do start to get captured in real time. I remember, gosh, it was a couple of months ago. I wasn't being particularly careful with one of our API integrations. And we were sitting there, and Marina messages me, and she's like, "Why didn't you just spend $2,000 on Claude tokens this week?" And I'm like, "What?" and she was like, she's like, she gets all these alerts. She's very diligent, and she shows me. She's like, yeah, we just blew $2,000 on tokens, and I was like, that wasn't in the budget, for
Right.
6 days of work. Okay,
Right.
why
Right.
did that happen?
Right.
And so we dug into it. And it was because some of our integrations were so greedy with the way they returned information. And we were using models that were too sophisticated for the work. So we were using the most expensive models with sloppy data on repeat.
Right.
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 And these were
Right.
customer facing things. So it wasn't even that. So customers were like, they didn't know, they were just using the tools, right? Because when your workforce or your customers, depending on where you're deploying these, sit down and they're working with these tools, like they're not thinking about the utility cost of that tool. And you don't really want them to. You want to set them up for success to get the work done. But the surprise bill that I got is the surprise bill that everybody's going to get
Yes.
at some point
Right.
if you're not careful with knowledge management. So I love this two workforce analogy.
Right. Right.
That they have two different needs, two different cost structures,
Hmm.
but you as a human, you as a leader, you have to set up your agents for success in the same way you should be setting up your humans for success
Exactly.
with the right tools and structures in governance and operations.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's where, I mean, if you go back to, I'm going to go rewind to the system side of things and use like a really ridiculously simple example, but it popped in my head when you're talking,
Yep.
right? Like when we all walk into our house, for the most part, we have a place where your keys go,
Yep.
right? It's on a hook, it's in a bowl, it's somewhere, but that's one of those things that over time, all of us as humans have wasted time looking for our keys.
Yes.
So we say, nope, there's the key bowl. Like that's where the keys go, right? And so, but you use it as a really simple analogy, but then think about that, how important, how simple that is, but what an important problem it solved. And we pointed in the right space to be able to say, we don't ever have to do that again. And when I'm going to take that analogy and then bring it over to AI, right?
Yep.
When we don't make it that simple for AI, the example you just gave, right?
Yep.
It's going to it's going to be doing more complex work that it doesn't need to do
Yes.
if we just deconstruct. We talk about work deconstruction all the time. We deconstruct that work, that agent, the operations of that in a way that it's efficient and again, not drawing that type of a token cost. It's not incurring, because think about it on the human side, right? Humans have a high cost of labor too, right? And we see that in manufacturing, especially. Like we get behind, we've got to, what do we have to do? We have to go into overtime. We have to go into mandatory overtime. There's all of these things that have to happen in the production of our manufacturing product,
Yeah.
that the only way we know how to solve right now is the human, not the only way, but for the most part, right? The
Yeah.
human overtime factor,
Yes.
right? And so if we think about AI in that same way, right? It's AI is a cost,
Yep.
and we have to think about what is the AI overtime factor, but there is a spot for that.
Yes.
And it is a real two workforce dynamic.
Yes.
And we have to factor that in. We have to deconstruct the work. And then when we say, now that we have the human supervising the agent, right? Like, what's the agent cost? And how do we think about that as an organization when we think about, again, I'll say HR artifacts, but we've got to spend time actually understanding how do we fulfill the accountabilities of the role.
So I love your key analogy. And I think one of the ways I would think about this as I was listening to you is what if sometimes you put it in the key bulb and sometimes you put it in the kitchen and sometimes you put it in your bedroom and sometimes you left it in your purse and
Right.
sometimes you, right. And then your son comes home and says, "Hey mom, can I have the keys? I want to go on a date or something."
Right. Right.
And you're like, "Sure."
The
And
keys are in
you're
the
busy.
cable.
And now your son's like, "Okay, I don't know where to find the keys." So maybe they start in the key bowl and then he goes to the kitchen, and then he goes to the bedroom, then he goes and says, "Can I look in your purse?" Right? That's what we're doing to AI
Exactly.
whenever we aren't disciplined with our knowledge.
Mhm.
But now imagine that your son is billing you for every single place he has to go look. So that's a crazy analogy,
Yeah,
but
but I love it.
in
Yeah.
reality, that's exactly what's happening
Right.
is if you're not clear about where that information goes and not disciplined about where it goes, you will incur the cost
Right.
of search with your AI. Now, as humans, we kind of love it because we're like, "Oh my gosh, it can find all these things across all these places." And that's true. And
Right.
that's amazing until you get the bill. And then you're
Right.
like, "Oh, shit, we've got to clean this up because I just spent $2,000 this past week and I wasn't expecting
Right.
to spend it on that particular thing."
Exactly.
So as we're talking about designing our work, one of the things we talked about last week was getting the information out of the heads of people. But now we have to be just as disciplined, if not more disciplined, about getting about the information in our systems because there is less flexibility and you feel the cost in real time as you start to go down this path. And again, this cost right now is cheaper than it will be because all of these are heavily subsidized at the moment of this recording, which is in June of 2026.
Right.
But mark my words, by June of 2028, we will be paying a lot more for
Absolutely.
AI because at some level, all of these businesses have to make a profit. They're all
Right.
running at a loss right now. They're all running on public market funds or will be soon or are running on VC funds, but at some level, the
Oh,
piper's got to get paid.
oh, it's coming. It's coming.
All right. So first thing we got to do is we got to list our sources. So we want to try and get to our design phase. We've already talked about the human side. So on the data side, first thing, list the sources, systems of record, system of knowledge. And I'm only going to make one quick comment about systems of semantics because I don't think this is relevant to most companies yet. And that is just making sure that if you've got things that mean this in multiple contexts, that you've got probably somewhere in your system of knowledge for now just a worksheet or a document or a glossary of when I say this, I also mean this, right? Most companies that aren't very large at this, or I shouldn't say aren't very large, that don't have sophisticated data management probably aren't ready for a system of semantics. So we're going to skip that for now. But systems of record, system of knowledge, if you get those two things right, agentification becomes much, much easier. But then the second thing is, okay, that's great, Jesse. I understand what you're saying. Like I can connect my AI theoretically, conceptually. How does that happen?
Mhm.
So the second thing after you list your sources is you've got to start thinking about the pipeline. How does this information move from one thing to another? So in my world, the term that we use all the time is API. And I think as you now are wearing the hat as a tech company leader, whether you like to or not, there are a couple of words that you need to know because these will make your life much easier or much more difficult and also expand your capabilities with AI. First one is API. API means that your systems are able to talk to each other. The
Mm.
second is MCP. MCP is how AI talks to systems. And the third is a connector. Connectors are used interchangeably with MCP in the world in Anthropic or Claude. But generally speaking, a connector is just when you've taken an API or an MCP and you've connected it to either an agent or to another system. So as you're listing out your sources, first thing you want to do is say, okay, I've got this source. It's a system of record. It's owned by, and actually we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about owners. It's owned by this particular person or this particular team. And its status is it's pretty well maintained or it needs to be updated. Then you say, okay, I've got this particular source. Let's pretend we're talking about HubSpot. That's a tool that a lot of people use.
Mhm.
HubSpot might be a system of record for your CRM. It is owned by, let's say, your marketing manager. They do a pretty good job, let's imagine, of maintaining that record. From a pipeline standpoint, that particular tool does have an API. And one way to know whether or not your tools have an API is just to Google tool name and API docs. If you just do that one Google phrase, HubSpot API docs, BigQuery API
Hmm.
docs, right? Espo CRM API docs, JobBoss API docs. Just do that query. And in most cases, if there is an API that is documented, you will see that it exists. And so what you want to document is HubSpot API question mark? Yes. Check yes, right? And that just lets you and your design team, as you start to move down the path of integration, know whether or not it's able to be accessed via API, which means it can be accessed programmatically without a human in the middle. You want to do the same thing with MCP. HubSpot, MCP. JobBoss, MCP. Here, MCP, right? Whatever that is, and you want to check that off too. Yes, it is available via MCP. Now, you should know that right now, way more systems have APIs than MCP. MCP is a relatively new technology. People are still trying to figure out, developers are still trying to figure out the right guardrails for their teams because they provide a lot of access to AI agents. They're very, very powerful. And so that power needs to be managed. APIs are every modern software should have API. If you have software that does not have an API, get new software. Because you have no shot
Ah,
I shouldn't say you have no shot at identification, but you're going to make your life a lot harder. So that's the second thing is after you list your sources, you then want to get really clear on whether or not they've got APIs and MCPs, because the answer to that question will let you know whether this stuff can be connected to AI agents. Then finally, you want to say, okay, I've got HubSpot. It's got an API. But now the next question is, how do we tier this for AI? Is this something that a human is going to use directly, invoking that system manual, like as an assistant? Is this something where it's going to be kind of run and then occasionally a human gets a notification they need to look at something? Or is it going to be something where like humans are taken out of the loop altogether and it's just going to run? APIs will give you the flexibility to do all three of those things. And so it's important as you start thinking through the design of work, that you have some sense for what you're expecting the AI to do and what you're expecting humans to do. Hard and fast rule, though, is no process should start out fully automated on day one. Never. And the reason is because there's always going to be edge cases that you aren't aware of. So anything that you're going to design around always needs to have an exception clause, and at the beginning always needs to have a way for a human to jump into that loop no matter what. Humans aren't always super great at governance. AI will just follow the human lead.
Right.
Okay. So step one, name your sources. Step two, figure out how they can connect with APIs or MCPs. Step three, starting to think about whether or not you're going to have this be an assisted interaction or something you'd like to fully automate. There's a whole spectrum for those things, but you're always going to start with humans in the loop. Humans in the loop. Next thing is what's missing. Okay. So we've got all of this information. If you've followed what we said before, where you've talked about outcomes and you have an idea about what this process is going to look like, you've mapped out what's in somebody's head. You're now mapping out your knowledge systems. The next question is what information is missing that still allows you to get to that outcome. And again, you want to document that too, because whoever your implementation partner is should help you then figure out how do you capture whatever is missing as you're going through that. And then finally, assemble all of this into a map. And like with so many other things, we've got a handy
We've got a tool for that.
We've got a tool. We're like it was like the old Apple thing. We've got an app for that.
Yeah,
We've got
yeah.
a tool. We've got
a tool for that.
We've got a tool for that. And so at the end, you assemble all of that information so you can say, all right, we've identified a constraint. Bingo. All right, we know the outcome we're looking for.
Right.
We know the people that have the knowledge that we need to extract the knowledge from. Now we know the systems that feed the work, and we've got it all on one page. You have this. You are about ready to start with a real design around a real system, a real system that can generate real returns, right? And none of this takes technical work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the good part about it is, yes, there's that technical piece of it.
Yes.
But, that's what we talk about so much is we've got to start with the design before deploy. And, that roadmap, right? That instrumentation, that's the design,
Yes.
a good component of that design piece. Because we talk about, one of the things we mentioned for this webinar is we talk about that 60-30 reality, right? And that's where this ratio lands, right? Because that 60-30 pattern really shows up when you're in this diagnostic phase. And so, when we think about that 60-30, it's really important because if we've got a role, so if we have a role that is primarily supposed to be around like judgment and strategy,
yeah,
right? And it's actually doing that maybe 60% of the time, they're routing, they're coordinating, they're doing paperwork, they're doing documentation, they're doing all of those things. Only 30% of the time is that role actually involved in judgment.
Right. Right.
And so, we think, oh, we've got this highly strategic role. But when you actually look at the role, and again, you go into that work and you look at the job description, you think about what actually is being done, we call that about the 60-30 rule. And that's what happens is the 60-30 pattern shows up across like senior level roles when there's enough regularity in that role that it functions as this like diagnostic signal, right? And we say, we're not really spending and we're not utilizing this human in this strategically complex fashion that we really should use that human in.
Right.
And so a lot of times you'll see that like from a diagnosis standpoint of view, when you start thinking about how do we be sure that we're ready to kind of walk through this process, not even to be ready for the process. It's the stuff that's going to come up in those conversations. And it's the stuff that should come up because what we're talking about, and when you hear Jesse's like his technical frame, I mean, your technical frame is unlike anybody I've ever met. And so it's like you listen to the technical frame and then you're like sit there as the human, right? Thinking, how do I operationalize this into my business?
Yeah.
And there's some design, I'm going to say before deploy work that's going to happen there because it's mindset, right? How do we start? I'm going to go back to the two workforce issue.
Mhm.
How do we start when we're sitting down talking about our work and our issues list and our problems and our rocks? And how do we sit there and think, I have two workforces?
Yep.
And where is that work going to go? How do I take my senior executive who's doing 60/30 with the wrong flip?
Yep.
How do I flip that? So now they're doing 30/60, right? And it's only going to happen if you take time to understand those accountabilities. And again, think about the
And the inputs
mindset.
to the work.
Exactly.
And the
You've
inputs to the
got to
work.
think about those inputs. So I think that's where like it really gets interesting. And you have to start thinking about what work do I have that I don't have to have Joe handle? Joe doesn't have to do that anymore because Joe is really good.
My sort of
And that
rule of thumb, which is definitely an exaggeration, is if I have to use a keyboard and a mouse and a screen, I don't need to
right,
do it.
right,
Right.
right,
Like, and that is an exaggeration, 100%.
right.
But I do think about this. I look at a CRM, our CRM unit, let's say, and I see all these fields that need to get filled out, and I'm just like, what are the minimal number of fields I need to
Right,
figure out,
right, right,
so that way
right,
somebody else can, not fail at their job later on.
right.
And that is how a lot of people approach their systems. And it's probably frustrating as the person who pays for the systems, because these are
Mhm.
often very expensive,
Right.
that the systems of record and these systems of knowledge end up being at best incomplete and at worst mere fragments.
Right.
And to your two workforce analogy, what you've done when you've allowed that environment to persist is you've actually cut the legs out from underneath your ability
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
now adopt this secondary workforce. Because this secondary workforce that's digitally native needs these digital inputs to be successful, or at least to be successful and cost effective,
Mhm.
right? It can muddle through all this stuff,
Right.
100%. It's just going to cost you time and money.
Mhm.
So if you
Mhm.
got unlimited time and unlimited money, it's fine,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if you don't, then you've got to start really thinking
If
about,
you do, let us know.
yeah,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
just then no.
Right. Right.
But as you talk about design, as you talk about these two workforces, most companies do not have a discipline of knowledge management.
Mhm.
I don't think most of us have thought about our knowledge as an asset.
Right.
And so if you take nothing away, I want you to realize that knowledge is an asset. For that workforce, the agentic workforce, it is the number one tool that they will use to make your business more productive. It's also the number one cost constraint that you will face if you're sloppy about it. And you don't have to be technical to start the design phase. What you do need to know is what bills you're paying and what those capabilities are. So what are those systems of knowledge? What are those systems of record? Who owns those systems, whether that's your IT or really should be a process manager? What connections are possible in those systems? And then along the spectrum of those systems, which things do humans need to be doing in this 60/30 split? And which things don't they need to be doing?
Mm.
Asterisk, they almost never need to do data entry.
Right. Right.
Almost never do they need to do data entry.
Well, or answer a policy question, right? I mean, as an HR practitioner, how many times do you get the same question over and over and over again, right? Like it's a policy question, it's a practice question. How do we do it? Like you should not, that is a very good example of a 60/30
Mhm.
that's not, the target's not set right, right? As someone at a CHR level, I should not be answering a policy question.
Yeah.
Not because it's beneath me, because there's no reason that my human knowledge base, my judgment, my authority, my understanding, all of those things, there's no reason that time should be spent in that bucket.
It should be in a system of knowledge
Correct.
that is categorized and accessible via an agent.
Correct. Correct.
Right.
Right.
And that kind of thing is a very easy thing to get into a system of knowledge if you're
Mhm.
thoughtful about
Mhm.
that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so after you've made all of those decisions, then just getting them all on one page. That way, whatever system you're trying to design, whatever agentic team you want to build, whatever thing you want to assist, whatever those things are, at least and the person you're working with knows these are the inputs that will drive the output. This is the human you need to talk to in order to drive that output. And if you've just done these three things, name a constraint, identify the subject matter expert or whoever it is that's going to hold that information, and document your systems, you will take the amount of time it takes to deploy something, you will cut it down exponentially. You will also drive the costs down exponentially. It just takes a little bit of upfront thought And then
for
later on,
compounding results.
for
I
compounding
mean,
results.
hence compound, right? But that is the basis of compound is we know through proven experience, if we take the time to do that, the compounding effects and the positive impact on an organization, the positive impact on the people in the organization, and the positive impact on the P&L is there.
Yes.
We
100%.
just have to do a little bit of work.
100%. Julie,
All right.
always a pleasure.
Oh my
I love
gosh.
these conversations.
Always
It's my
great.
favorite day of
Yeah.
the week.
It really is for me
So
too.
thank you,
Yeah.
as always.
Thank you.
This will be available for download wherever you listen to this.
Absolutely. So join us at next Compound Conversation. And until then, let's stop transforming and let's start compounding.